And today we are attempting to do something we've not done before. To contemplate on the Dhamma. Because meditation has lots of connotations which people have really misunderstood what meditation is nowadays. A lot of people don't know what meditation is. They have their interpretations of what meditation is, and sometimes people get lost. And that's such a shame. Meditation did exist even before the time of the Buddha. So it's not the Buddha's invention. And people did all sorts of things in the name of meditation. But as I have been reminding you, in preparation for today, we are not going to be doing a guided recitation program. It's guided meditation. So it's not a case of I say and you repeat. That's not what we're trying to do. And if you have been coming along to sermons regularly, and if you have, as I asked you to, gone back and listen to the previous programs, then you will know what it is we are about to do today. So hopefully you will not require a huge introduction to what we are about to do. Having said that, there are a few things I think that is worth reminding ourselves. So the first thing is, now let's be honest with ourselves here. There is the odd lady or gentleman in the audience, and also perhaps online, who has trouble keeping their eyes open even in the middle of a sermon. Because I can see all of you from where I'm sat. This vantage point is a perfect one to observe all of you. So through the course of today's session, I'm not going to be doing a lot of talking. So it's going to be even more challenging to overcome that obstacle. We must understand that we are not here to just while away the hours. We're not here just to pass away the hours, right? We are here for a purpose. So please be honest to yourselves. Don't delude yourselves. Self-delusion isn't going to get you anywhere. If ever you feel you're starting to doze off, then please do something about it. We are not animals, we are human beings, so we can act with intelligence and intellect. So we can do something about it. So if you're starting to feel a little bit sleepy, then you may have some water with you. Maybe just sprinkle some water on your face, just to waken you up. If that fails, then stand up. You're free to do all of this. This is why I'm saying this right at the beginning. And if that is still not working, then maybe walk. There's plenty of room here, at the back, on the sides. Please feel free to get up and walk. And that's all perfectly fine, because our aim, this is not a sleeping competition. Who sleeps first? That's not what we are trying to find. This is about trying to find the time so that you can reflect on all the Dhamma that we've been discussing. Ultimately, that is what meditation is. We are trying to give you the time because in the midst of your busy chores and your busy schedules and duties and responsibilities in your lay lives, it can be quite tough and challenging to find some time where you can sit down and reflect on the Dhamma. So this is why, because you have already, and your family, your relations, those people who set expectations on you, have accepted that Sunday afternoons you're already occupied, right? So they know you're preoccupied on a Sunday afternoon. So now they can't come back to you with any excuses for interrupting you because you're here. So we are going to be using this time to reflect on the Dhamma that you have been listening to, practicing in preparation for this day. Now I know there are some of you who have come along to the Sinhala programs as well, and that is great. So you'll have some people in the audience who will have had some practice with this. They'll also be novice practitioners, and that's perfectly fine. But we're going to start from the basics, because this is not a race. And if there's anyone who feels, oh, I've done that before, then quite frankly, you're not suitable to even be here. So we must learn to put our ego to a side and focus on trying to achieve what we need to do. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I want you all to be realistic. I don't know what expectations you might have for this session. I don't expect any of you to start levitating, so no pressure there. Don't feel you have to, just in case. I don't expect any of you to start emanating radiant colors, so no expectation there. It's okay if it doesn't happen. Because all we are trying to do is reflect on the Dhamma. All we are trying to do is cleanse our minds, really. There are defilements that have entangled our minds. And this is nothing but a process of cleansing the mind. It's like throwing your mind into a washing machine. This is what we are trying to do here. So it's going through a spin cycle, a wash cycle, a detergent washing cycle, right? And it comes out clean fabric. Sometimes you might have to wash it several times before it's clean, because some stains are quite strong. They don't come off that easily. So for someone who's got a heavily soiled mind, like all of us, it takes a long time to clean. But we've all got to start somewhere. And that is what we are about to do. So don't expect to see flashes of light, blue lights, red lights, flashes. And I'll tell you right off the bat, if you start seeing flashes of light, there's only one thing you need to do: open your eyes. Because you're off track. Come back to reality. Wake up. You're probably dozing. You're probably falling asleep. Just wake up, open your eyes. Sometimes these things might happen. This is why I'm forewarning you. You might have your eyes closed, and after a little while you start to see flashes of blue, red, yellow, and then they all start mixing together in the middle, like yin yang, forming in front of you. Wow, I'm really enlightened now. No, you're not enlightening, you're insane. You're heading the wrong direction. So that's not what we want. If you're starting to see flashes of light, just open your eyes. It's probably just this. So if you start falling asleep, open your eyes. If you start to see flashes of light, open your eyes. Some people start hearing voices in the back of their heads. All sorts of voices. Don't worry, that's not your ancestors trying to talk to you. It's not extraterrestrial beings trying to communicate with the human race. I guarantee they're not going to pick you, don't worry. If you start to hear voices, just open your eyes. If that fails, just slap yourself, and then you'll be back to normal. So, second bit of advice. Last piece of advice. The more you do this, the more humble you have to become. The more down to earth you have to become. We're not about showing off. We never were, we aren't, and we never will be. So I don't want any of you, after having come along to these sessions, to start going around telling people, hey, you know what, I'm now meditating. This is not what this is about, because then you're not following the Buddha's teaching. We are in a hospital. When was the last time you bragged about being in a hospital? When was the last time you bragged about going to the doctor for an insulin injection? We are all in a hospital for treatment. We are all infected with raga, desha, moha. So you've come to see the doctor. He's given us a prescription, and all we are doing is taking our medication in the hope that we can all cure ourselves as soon as possible. This doesn't give us any of us bragging rights. We should really be ashamed of ourselves. The fact that we have to do this, we should be ashamed. The fact that I have to preach to you, I'm ashamed. The fact that I'm sat here right now, I'm ashamed of that. Because it goes to say that I didn't get what I had to get done in my previous births. I left it undone. And therefore I'm here again, trying to do what I should have done a very, very long time ago. So this is not an activity to boast about. The more the Dhamma becomes part of your life, the more humble you will become. And that humbleness also is not something to show off. Sometimes people show off their humility, their humbleness. Have to be very careful how ego gets the better of you. This happens. So if you're aware of how your mind works, you will notice sometimes your mind will start saying these things. Go and show that you're humble. You will show your humility in the presence of others. You'll go wash the toilets. You'll do all the dirty jobs, provided someone's there to watch you doing it. Why? So you can score points. That's not humility. That's showing off. Be very careful. We all have this problem. For as long as there's ego in our minds, there's mana in our minds, it will try to get the better of you. Don't succumb. Don't give in. This is why I always say the best thing to do is be arrogant with ego. Whenever ego says something, do the opposite of that. Whatever it is. It might be something that is acceptable as a good thing, that generally society sees as a good thing. Still, if it's ego that's telling you to do it, do the opposite. Because chances are ego's trying to get you to do it in the hope of fostering your ego even more, feeding your ego. And that's not going to get you to Nibbana. So, why am I saying this now? Because you've been coming along to sermons for a long time, and now you're in a privileged position where you're then going to be doing this meditation program, and if this works out, we'll probably be doing it once every month. But I don't want anyone going out there and boasting about it to your friends, to your relatives, that I'm now meditating. I'm going to an English meditation program. These are things that we use to boast, brag about ourselves. I listen to English sermons. Whatever, this is the ego. Whatever ego can hold on to, it will. So be very careful. So those are my 3 bits of advice before we begin. I think this is nothing new. For those of you who've come along to previous meditation programs, you will have heard Guru Swami Maharaj say this. So ultimately the reason I'm sharing this advice with you is only because I want you to get the most out of your time. I want you all to leave a better person than you came here. I want you all to move one step closer, just 1 inch closer to Nibbana with every time you come to the monastery. Every time we meet each other, I want you to move 1 step closer to Nibbana. Every time we have a chat, every time I talk to you, both you and I, we must move 1 step closer to Nibbana. If we are moving the opposite direction, then that association has to stop. Yes or no? If every time you see me, every time I talk to you, you're moving 1 step away from Nibbana, then this is not a wholesome association. You must stop it immediately. It's not helping you. You should not come to see me again. Right. We don't have a great deal of time. This is going to be one of the challenges that we have. For those of you who've come along to the weekly programs, and we give the feedback form, you usually tick it's on the third or the fourth day that you start to be able to contemplate on the Dhamma. So we don't have 3 or 4 days. We are trying to do this in a matter of hours. This is why I'm going through stuff as quickly as we possibly can. But I think it's worthwhile just to very quickly do a whistle-stop tour on the Nyaya, the doctrine, the fundamental doctrine, which is what we are going to be reflecting on initially. What we practice here, you must practice at home. Because this is only me showing you or giving you some instruction on what you ought to be practicing at home. Don't think that just because you come here and you do your meditation here, you're going to be able to achieve Nibbana. It's not that easy. It's not that difficult, but it's not that easy either. So you have to practice what you practice here at home. So let's go over the doctrine very quickly, and then this is what we are going to be reflecting on in the first phase of today's session. So, as we know, we, all human beings, and all sentient beings, we go through existence. Living, we know we are alive because we can see things, we can hear things, we can smell, taste and touch things, and we can think about things through our mind. So our 5 senses coupled with the mind help us to perceive that we are alive. If none of you can see, hear, smell, touch, taste or think, then you would fail the test of am I alive? So this is what living is about. But all these sensations, they come to us through our 5 senses, and once they hit the brain, which is the controlling center for all these sensory inputs, the brain does this magnificent job of translating those inputs into Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, and passing them down to the mind. So Rupa being the material or the sense impressions, you have Rupa Rupa, Shabda Rupa, Gandha Rupa, Rasa Rupa, Pottabha Rupa and Dhamma Rupa. So Rupa Rupa is a sense impression if that sense input came from the eye. Shabda Rupa is a sense impression that came from the ear, and so on and so forth. It's like taking a photograph. If I took a photograph of you right now and I gave you the printout and I ask you, is that you? I'm pointing at the picture. The answer is going to be yes and no at the same time, right? You're going to say yes. So how come you're there and here at the same time? Then I'm going to ask. Well, then you're going to say, no, it's not me. I thought you just said it is you. So that is what a sense impression is. It's not the same thing, but it's not different either. It's like a photograph of what you see in the outside world that the mind takes in. This kicks off the process. So when you have a Rupa Rupa, Shabda Rupa, Gandha Rupa, Rasa Rupa, Pottabha Rupa, which is the sense impression that comes through touch, then you have Vedana, Sanya, Sankara and Vijnana arising in the mind itself. It's only the Rupa that comes from the outside. The rest of it is created in the mind itself. So Vedana is the sensation. It's knowing that your inputs or your senses have been triggered. It's like if you imagine an octopus with its arms, tentacles. If one of those tentacles is triggered, now the octopus knows which direction its prey is coming from. So it then turns its attention to that side. So likewise, the mind knows, because of Vedana, where this sense impression has come from, whether it's come from the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, or touch, and so on. So that's Vedana. Then you have Sanya. This is the way you identify. This is how you recognize what you have just seen. So I can see you right now. You can see me right now. You can see all of this stuff. You give these things names, right? Flower, clock, remote, bottle, AC, fan, person, man, woman, white man, black man, right? These are all Sanya. Recognition. To recognize, basically recognition is recognition. So to recognize, basically what you're doing is you're going back into your memory. Have I seen this thing before? Have I heard this before? Have I tasted this, smelled this before? What was the name I gave to this? Because when we have a name, now it's easy to identify them. So when I say, for example, chocolate, right? Is it just the sight of chocolate that comes to you? Why, what about the sound, smell, taste, and touch? All of these things come rushing back to you, but all I needed was one name. It's like on a database. You have your index, right? You have the index number, and the rest of the data comes right straight through. So that's how Vedana Sanya works. Then there's Sankara. So Sankara is it's the verbs that you associate, the doing things that you associate with whichever Rupa, Shabda, Gandha, Rasa, Sparsha that came your way. So again, if I say chocolate, what verb comes to mind? Eat. Bathe? No, but back in those days, I think people used to do that. In the time of the Romans, they melted chocolate and people used to bathe in chocolate. I think it's a treatment they give in spas and things like that. Not that I've ever experienced it, but I've heard. Apparently people do that kind of thing. Bathe in chocolate. So now if I say chocolate, you have two verbs associated with it. One is eat, one is bathe. Then you have dipping chocolate. You can dip your marshmallows, your strawberries, right? So all those things. But these are all the verbs that you associate with it. If I say gun, what verb comes to mind? Shoot. What about sweep the house? No, because that's not a sankara that is associated with the sanya gun. So with the sanya, associated with that sanya, with that recognition, with that ID, you have several verbs. And these are the verbs that come to mind as sankara. And this happens even to an arahant. If I say the word microphone to an arahant, he's not going to wonder, oh, what do you do with a microphone? If he knows what a microphone is used for, then that memory comes flashing back to him. So, in that sense, it's okay. That's not a problem. If I say the word mic and you say speak or amplify, there's nothing wrong with that. But if I say mic, I'm not talking about Michael mic, I'm talking about this mic. If I say mic and sensual feelings come to mind, now there's something wrong with that. Because that is something you've created in your own mind. That does not exist for real in the real world. So I say woman or man. Sensuality comes to mind. There's something wrong with that. Because those are things that people create in their mind. Sensuality is a fabrication of the mind. It's not something that exists for real. So we'll talk about some of these things later on. So, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, then finally you have Vijnana. Vijnana is a conscience, the job of which is to amalgamate all of these other aggregates, the Rupa, the Vedana, the Sanya, the Sankara, and then finally perceive it as being this object that is able to do this, and this is the name I give it, and I have just seen it, I have just heard it, I have just smelt it, and so on and so forth. So that is what Vijnana does. It's kind of the bringing all of that together. So no matter what we've done in all our lives, really all we've really done is take in Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. We've done nothing else in our lives. I say flower, birds, bees, trees, star, moon, planets, sky. No matter what I say, ultimately the only way you have ever perceived any of these things is through Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. And the reason for that is because the mind is not able to perceive anything else. The mind only speaks that language, the language of the five aggregates. This is the only language the mind speaks. So there's only 5 words in the language that mind speaks, and that's Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. You talk to the mind in any other word, it's not going to understand. So when the brain says, I've just seen something, the mind says, what's that in 5 aggregate? Talk, speech. So now the brain has to do the job of translating that. It's like if you go on holiday somewhere and someone starts to speak in some language you don't understand, you say, what's that in English? You see a board, what's that in Sinhala? Or what's that in English? So someone who knows both languages has to translate it for you, right? So brain is able to do both. It speaks the language of the eye, it also speaks the language of the mind. So now the brain is a really good translator because it can translate this live. It's translating it live. On the fly, it's translating this. This is why your mind can perceive things. But it's not the brain that attaches to the outside, to the world. It's the mind that attaches to the world. And it's the mind that only perceives Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Viññāna. So, what we are going to do then is for the first session, the first phase of our program, is I want you to reflect on some experiences in life. You don't have to think so hard to come up with experiences, even the experiences you have right now. The fact that you can see something right now, or the fact that you can feel there's a cushion underneath you, or you're sat on a chair, or your feet touching the floor, whatever. Either that, or some experiences you really have had in your life. Maybe you've had your birthday recently, or maybe it's the new year. Maybe you met a friend recently, or you went to work, you were gardening just before you came here, whatever, or some sight you might have seen on your way here. Whatever it might have been, I want you to see it in terms of Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Viññāna. I want you to not rather see it, I want you to reflect on it in those terms. Because ultimately, that's all it is. So I want you to perceive how the mind perceives the world. Does that make sense? I want you all to reflect on how the mind perceives the world that we live in. Like when I say, can you perceive how a little child sees the world? Then you go into that child's world. Oh, this is how they might perceive. You get into the shoes of the child, right? Get into somebody else's shoes. We do that all the time, right? So I want you to now to get into the shoes of the mind. Get into the mind shoes and think about how the mind perceives the world. And that's nothing other than Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Viññāna. So if, for instance, if it's a flower, I want you to reflect on what the Rupa bit is about this. So of course, there's a Rupa. If you went and tapped the petals or maybe the leaves or whatever, now you're going to get Shabda Rupa. Of course, if you smell the flower, you're going to get Gandha Rupa. If you licked it, there's going to be Rasa Rupa. And if you touch it, Sparsha Rupa. And when I say flower, all these things come together. That's your Dhamma Rupa. Right? So Rupa, Vedana, the fact that you have seen the flower, the mind knows that I have now seen this. That's the Vedana. So Vedana comes for Rupa, Shabda, Gandha, Rasa, Sparsha as well. All these sensory inputs. The mind knows, yes, I've just seen it, I've just heard it, I've just smelt it, the mind's always going on about it. Even as I'm talking, if there's a sound coming from somewhere, I've just heard something, I've just seen something, I've just smelled something. The mind's always doing this. This is all Vedana. And the Sanya, of course, is the flower. And even the flower, this is the sight of the flower, the smell of the flower, the taste of the flower. These are all Sanya. This is how, if I were to blindfold you and hold a bottle of perfume and spray some, maybe jasmine-scented perfume, you're going to tell me that's jasmine. And perhaps even the flower jasmine might come into your mind. You might recollect the jasmine flower. This is because this is all the associations. So even the smell of jasmine, you are able to give a sanya, the label. Right? And then finally the sankara. So if it's a flower, you go smell. This is the sankara. And viññāna is, of course, bringing all that together. So this is what I want you to do now. Let's take some time. And contrary to how we've always seen the world, all our lives we've seen the world as being sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Actually, no, we've seen it as people, birds, beasts, trees,